Good morning, data leaders. Paul from the Data Storytellers here. And today I'm with Jonas Blomqvist, who's the head of analytics and data at Scandinavian Airlines. Great to have you with us, and I hope I didn't butcher your name.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. So just to start with, tell us a bit about yourself in a few words.
Yeah, in a few words, maybe quite a few words. If I try to explain my background here and my journey within this field, I started out, almost 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, to be more precise, as a general IT consultant at a company named Capgemini. And I worked, with different development activities, different kind of platforms before I decided to specialize more within business intelligence and data warehousing. So I worked at that company for, I think, about 6 years before I decided to join a company called Stretch that was more specialized within SAP and SAP Business Works. So I have a really strong background within business intelligence within the SAP platform. So I worked at that company for several years, and I had different consultancy assignments at pretty huge companies such as Son Ericsson, PostNord, which is the Swedish postal office, E.ON, and almost 6 years at Ericsson in different roles within their analytical community. And during these years of consultancy work, I also, got more and more internal responsibility, working both as a manager and working with sales within this company. Short period at another specialist company called Eins before I joined the big Swedish retailer ICA. So that was my years as a consultant, and then I can skip forward and tell you a bit more about my line manager experience. So I started out at ICA as a delivery manager, and within ICA I was responsible for everything related to the data platforms, development, maintenance and operation of solutions and data capabilities. I also participated in different steering groups where we were driving implementation of self-service BI capabilities such as Tableau, a really interesting project. I was also part of different forums working with data governance questions and data management questions and master data questions. So a really good and great experience within ICA Sweden. But during that time, I worked mainly within IT and focusing quite a lot on deliverables, development, securing that we had the right capabilities, right resources, and that we had good ways of working and that we were really efficient in the development and delivery process. So I worked there for a couple of years as well before I took this position at SAS. And I started out at SAS prior to the pandemic, but I only managed to work for almost a year before the pandemic hit us. So we have had a quite special situation at SAS. But at SAS, just to give some more context, I'm responsible for the department that provides both data and solutions and technical capabilities in a close collaboration with all of our different business areas. So we're working really cross-functional, both within IT, supporting, other departments within IT with their product development, but also directly against different analytical functions, providing data so that they can, get the insights and take the right decisions and optimize their business to as much extent as possible. So that's my current role at SAS. I can just mention as well, maybe it's not that important in this context, but since the last reorganization, I'm also responsible for our integration area. So it's not only data and data management these days, but it's also quite a lot related to integration and integration capabilities and everything we do related to API management, etc. So quite a broad role within SAS.
Yeah, incredible broad background as well. As you said, you've been working in this field for the better part of 20 years, right? So
yeah.
Throughout your time of consulting and now working at SAS and the other roles you mentioned, what does BI mean to you? What is the value that BI can bring, and what do you perceive business intelligence to be?
Yeah, it's these days I think it's to be honest pretty much like a foundation and hygiene factors these days, that you need to be in control of your data, you need to be in control of what data your business processes creates and how the data is modeled and combined, and the value that the data can give your organization. So the business intelligence is very much hygiene factors. So you need to invest in it, you need to be in control of the data, and you need to be able to provide the data to all the different stakeholders you have within your organization, because without the data and without the insights created, you're kind of lost these days. So it's very much something that you have to spend time and money and invest in when you run the company, when you run a complex business model as ours.
And I imagine we'll get into some of the best practices and the common pitfalls that you've seen throughout your career on business intelligence implementation engagement. What makes you want to work with business intelligence every day? You know, you've been doing it for 20 years, so I'd like to think that you do enjoy it. What's the catch for you?
I think the catch for me is the complexity, and that it's a never-ending story. You're never done. When you work with data and trying to gather data, model data, secure data quality, and provide the data in a huge enterprise organization, everything is constantly changing. So you need to keep track of what's evolving, what's changing, ways of working, processes, application, etc., etc. And at the same time, you need to focus on how can we modernize what we have, how can we give the business even more technical capabilities to do their work even better and more efficient. So it's a constant struggle to keep all of these different dimensions up and running, and that's something that that is really interesting from my perspective, and that makes this area never dull. It's always interesting, and it's always something new coming up, and it's always changes that impacts your life and your solution and your platforms, and that's really interesting. And especially these days when top executive understands the value of the data and what how this data can actually transform your business and create new value, new solutions, new products, and how it can impact your business model. That makes it even more interesting, for sure.
Absolutely. So can you tell us about a time that you affected organizational change, whether it's in your current role or previously? You know, what you and the BI team contributed to that, how you got the engagement, and, you know, maybe how that translated into real business success?
Yeah, it's many times when you work in a data team with technical capabilities, it's always like you do it together with the business stakeholders and the analyst team. So I like to see ourselves like a foundation and an enabler to get the organization self-sufficient with the insights and the solutions in many cases. So when we get the most value out of what we do is when we actually take data, enterprise data, and make it easily available and understandable. and at the same time give the business the tools needed, like proper self-service analytical tools as Power BI or Tableau or anything else on top of this quality secured enterprise data, then you can really see how the organization becomes more and more data driven by itself, more or less. So because the business themselves, they want the data, they need the data because they have the questions from their management. They need to understand how the market is behaving. They need to understand which products that are profitable. They need to understand how we should maximize our revenue, etc., etc. So if you provide the right data, the right tooling, you will get that data-driven organization. And I've seen that several times that it happens, and it's really pleasing and nice to watch each and every time that you are in an organization that really adopts and utilize the power of data and technology to improve the business. Now, but if you want me to be more specific, maybe we can talk a bit about implementing self-service tools and capabilities, because then you go from, as I tried to say here, from building old traditional, more silo-oriented BI solutions when you actually build more or less a reporting solution or a dashboard solution for a specific audience, for a few stakeholders, and you really adopted the business logic and everything according to their specific requirements. If you try to break that down and more build that data foundation, and you build that data foundation so you can start to combine data from different areas of the business, and when you give the power to the business community to combine the data themselves and actually build the solutions and gain the insights, that's when you get the real exponential growth of your investments. And sometimes I wish I could measure that growth and what that means and the value of it, because that's many times a bit difficult.
And you give me like a ton of questions that I want to pick your brain out for this. First of all, you mentioned data driven. How would you define data drivenness? What do you think at the heart of it means to be data driven?
No, but it's of course, the more traditional view on it and how you define it is that you shouldn't use the gut feeling to take decisions. You need to be able to, you can have a gut feeling, you can have different scenarios, you can have different alternatives when you take a decision. But if you're supposed to be data driven, you need to be able to not maybe prove it, but at least have the data available that shows that this is actually the right direction or the right decision, and then you need those capabilities and you need the data available so you can actually not only guess what's the best choice for us, but you can actually prove it or highlight it and maybe do some A/B tests or other activities to actually prove that this is what we should do, and this is actually based on our customer behavior, our customer segmentation, or the revenue that we get from these different alternatives.
And again,
when people start to ask them, but I think also it's very much a culture when people are not satisfied just by thinking or guessing or just discussing things in the meeting and decide something. When they want to have data and they want to understand the underlying data that actually is the decision material for a specific decision, and they ask those questions, that's when you start to understand that these people and this organization and this culture is actually driven by data, and that's something that I believe everyone is trying to achieve these days.
Yeah, and this podcast in itself is kind of a metaphor for data culture in itself, because when what I'm asking you is the tip of the iceberg, and then you give me under the surface, there's tons more going on, which again I really want to get into. You also mentioned the data foundations earlier, and this is absolutely paramount. So, what role do you think that data analytics leaders, whether that's in bigger organizations like the chief data officers or heads of functions outside of data, what role do you think that these guys play in the building these foundations?
Yeah, but the leaders within this area, it's really important to understand, not only technology but data as such, and the business, and you need leaders that has the right commitment and the right network on executive level within an organization to be able to drive the transformation change needed to get the most value out of the investment. So that's something that is, I believe, really, really important. And another thing that I think is important to drive change and is to be persistent, because change takes extremely long time within a cross-functional area like this. Because when you work with changes and new ways of working and trying to implement another culture or being more data driven, a company organization, it's always, you have different maturity level within different areas, and change takes time. So you need to have leaders that believe in the long-term objective and that has the persistency to drive the change over time, and secure that they have the right mandate to do so as well. So that's something that I believe is really, really important. And maybe another thing that came to my mind is, if you are a leader within this field, you need to be at the same time really pragmatic, because we have a lot of people talking about the nirvana of things, the end state, and that's something that you can steer against. But this is, as I said in the beginning, a journey that never ends, and what we have to do is to secure that we deliver value during the transformation and during the change, because people are tired of waiting. Like 10 years ago, or I don't even remember now, everyone was talking about building these, huge, enormous enterprise data warehouses, and give me 50 million SEK or 5 million pounds or euros or whatever, and in 5 years you will have everything in place and everything will be perfect. No one will have that. No one is waiting for that these days. You need to be able to provide data and value constantly, daily. That's what's expected. You never get the time. What's the key
barrier to that, then, do you think, for data transformation leaders to keep constantly increasing, showing this value? What do you think is the biggest challenge to doing that?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is, I believe, in many organizations, is to get the funding needed, and the people understands that this is, the value is not always created by in this organization or the organization driving data implementation, working with data governance, working with data models, technical capabilities. The value is created out there in the organization, and it's not always easy to measure that and give the KPIs on that we create the value of this amount of money over this number of years. It's just something that we need to spend time in and invest in over time. So getting that mandate to do that over time is extremely important. And then you need to balance what we talked about a bit earlier. You need to balance, the time you spend on the old, boring stuff like life cycle management activities. You need to keep your platforms up to date. You need to modernize, you need to go cloud, you maybe want to transform your data models so you can combine data in an easier way. You need to work with the data lake concepts. You need to do that at the same time as you take care of your legacy platforms, as you take care of minor development and changes throughout the organization. So you need to balance all of these different dimensions and aspects at the same time. And that's something that is not always easy.
Yeah. And a bit of a wishful thinking question here, but
Yeah.
assuming that funding wasn't the issue and you were responsible for a data function at a large company, where would you put the majority of that money? Would you put it into hiring good people? Would you put it into a new data warehouse? What would be your number one goal? What I'm asking is, what is the biggest opportunity, do you think, for ambitious companies?
I think it's always boils down to competence and people, and building good teams that not only understand the technology but also understands the business and the data such, and that takes time. So you need to work with retention. You need to build a good culture. You need to involve people, and your employees and consultants need to feel that they are a part of something bigger, and that what they do is creating real value. And so people and culture is extremely important. Technology is an enabler for sure, but we have had technology around for quite some time, and we still struggle with some basic stuff like shared definitions, data governance, data quality, and the roles and ways of working. All those things are still something we work with and can improve, even though technology is way more powerful, full, and the capacity is I couldn't anticipate the capacity we have today when I started out in this business, but still we have problems with performance sometimes, which is a bit interesting because we create so much more data, right? And we crunch the data in another way as well. So
yeah. It's a plethora of issues, right? And you mentioned earlier empowerment, which is something I really want to get into. What other qualities do you think that the leaders possess, the good leaders possess, those who inspire that real change and those who are successful at driving positive transformation within data? You mentioned empowerment. What other qualities do you think that are important here?
For a leader to drive the change.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mentioned it a bit, being having that huge network and the right commitment within the organization is extremely important. And it's also, building a leader that can build, the trust and awareness needed and get that mandate to be involved in, all the different strategic initiatives within the company, because it's if you are supposed to succeed as a leader and as a transformation leader within this area, you need to be involved more or less in all decisions impacting the enterprise-wide data strategy and decisions related to technical capabilities, etc. Because otherwise it's really difficult to steer against this long-term vision with your roadmap and securing that you actually can build the competence and technology needed to support all of these different requirements. Because more than one time in my career, I've seen that it's very easy to take deviations from the path, because it's if you buy a product, if you want to implement something, it's very easy to go for, the custom built or the pre-built stuff and pre-built data models, pre-built solutions, pre-built algorithms provided by an external supplier vendor. And that can be sometimes excellent, and it can be the right strategic decision, and it can be stuff that we can't build ourselves. But it still has to be a cautious decision, and you need to take that into consideration, how that impacts your long-term enterprise data strategy and the technical capabilities that you're trying to provide for the organization. So that's something that you need to be able to manage for sure.
Mm. And you mentioned trust there. What are some of well, actually, first of all, before we go into trust, I wanted to just ask you about deviating. And you mentioned that there's all these shiny tools and technologies out there. What do you find is best, not necessarily to keep somebody on the path, but to bring someone back into the fold of, this is great, but here's what we need to do. Here's the path we need to follow. Let's stick to it. What kind of skills and communication styles do you use for that?
I think it's a tricky one, but I think many times you need to build that trust, and you can build that trust by always delivering and providing solutions and supporting the different key stakeholders within your organization, so that you are seen as someone that solves problem and that supports their needs instead of someone that becomes a bottleneck when it comes and a hinder for development and new solutions and new technology implementations, etc. So always trying to deliver on promises and deadlines, and also realize that you need to be humble, and you need to try to understand where others come from and why they want to deviate from the path, and if you can find a way to both secure short-term objectives and business value needed, and without compromising too much on the path and your long-term objectives. But sometimes you need to do that, but then you need to take a decision, and you need to change your long-term ambition, and you need to revise what you're currently doing, and that happens all of the time, I believe, and that's also something that all of us these days need to adopt to. That change is extremely fast, and you don't know how things will work in 3 to 5 years. So you can have as I said, you can have a direction that you steer against, but then you need to be able to take new decisions down the path and change your mind and get new insights and listen to others who knows more sometimes than yourself.
Yeah.
So being humble, I think, is extremely important within this area.
Yeah.
You never know everything about these things.
And I think that you mentioned humility, but a lot of the actions you were describing there were more about being assertive and being courageous. And it's really difficult because you need to be able to walk the path and have the courage and the assertiveness to walk that path, but also have the humility to realize that, like you said, external things change, internal things change. People might get let go. Business might not be so good. There might be less funding for it. You need to be able to really adapt and evolve. And I think that while you need to be humble, you should never be too humble, and you should always, be proud and assertive about what you're doing is right. Which is, I guess, where we're going to talk about more the soft skill side of things. So how important do you think of things like communication, persuasion, storytelling in terms of building fruitful relationships with these key stakeholders?
But it's very important, and I said, building that trust, and it boils down to that you can communicate, and you can present your visions and why we exist and the purpose of these initiatives in a way that is understandable and makes sense from more C-level management aspect as well. And that is not always easy, and I can see that for myself, having a background more as a developer, solution architect, project leader, line manager with most focusing on development and deliverables and technology, getting more and more into strategic and technical questions. It's not always easy to talk the same language as top executives in big organizations. So trying to understand this as the bigger picture is of course important, but at the same time, when needed, bring in external help, bring in people who have done similar changes, initiatives at other companies with the great success. Don't hesitate to ask for help. Don't hesitate to utilize external know-how for your own organization. and that's something that you can always do.
Absolutely. So can you tell us about a time that these skills played into your success as a a business intelligence leader, an analytics leader? Maybe a time that there was a program that needed to get back on track, or a time where you needed to spread data literacy, for example, or change just the behavior of key stakeholders, maybe something like that.
I think my consultancy background has always helped me a lot, being able to talk to different person in different ways. I can talk to DBAs and developers and top management people and adjusting my how do you say that, my message based a bit upon the stakeholder that I'm talking to, and on the audience and what I want to achieve.
You mentioned trust earlier as well, and this is something else I wanted to ask. What do you think are the best questions to ask when you want to build trust?
Yeah, when I want to build trust, it's not trying to not trying to show and that you understand everything and know everything and have the right answers and solutions in place. Instead, try to ask the questions to find the root cause to things. Why is this question important for you in your organization? Where does this question come from? What is driving your organization and yourself asking me this question? What does it originate from? Is it and then try to, by being curious and asking questions, trying to find the root cause to things. And then also extremely important when you work within IT, don't believe that you can fix everything with the technical capability and solution that you're responsible for and have in place. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is, I totally understand this. This is something that we need to address, but we need to involve other colleagues from other departments, or we need to look at this together with some external vendor supplier, because this is something that we don't have in place today, and this is something that is not really suited for the services and platforms and solutions that we provide. So that's one thing we try to do, and I try to do at least, and just involve the right people and from the beginning.
Okay, so 2 follow-up questions from that then, and probably one I should have asked at the start. First of all, what do you see your role across the business? Are you a champion for data? Are you a change agent? Are you, the go-to data guy, the data educator, let's say? Where do you see that role, will be my first question.
I think if you ask this current organization, I think we're mainly seen as the data guys, the data providers. If you need new data, and if you need data being modeled and being provided or being pushed to external parties or other internal parties, we are the go-to department. So I think that's how we are seen. And then we try to transform ourselves more into not only providing the data, but also providing more and more know-how about how we can work with the data, how we can combine data, how we can visualize data, how we can work with data storytelling, as you talked a bit about earlier. So we build quite a lot of management dashboards and visualizations, etc., in Power BI and other things as well. So we try to do both when it comes to data. And another thing that we're working with quite a lot, and we'll focus even more on going forward, is the whole governance aspect of data. How should we drive governance on an enterprise level across different business departments without, decreasing the self-service aspects of things. You want the business and the organization to be able to get hold of the data needed and build their own solutions and get the insights, etc., etc. But at the same time, you need to manage the governance and secure that you do this in a safe and secure way. So finding that balance is crucial for us, because otherwise, we will soon be seen as the data guys who are a bottleneck, because they will not be able to provide us with everything we need. So that's something we for sure want to avoid here.
So that's a good question as well about the governance side of things. Do you think it's better to send the team out, so to speak, on particular missions? Say you've got a team of BI developers and you want to send them out to particular functions and plant those guys in, or do you think it's better to let the data come to you, so to speak, and then you can sort it and rejig it and get the insights from it and send those back out?
I think what we are aiming for is to try to get away from the organizational boundaries, how you work and how you provide solutions and insights, and more try to be more team driven and data driven, and combine the right people from other parts of the IT organization with people from my team, with people from the data scientist team, together with the business stakeholders, and work together in a more team-oriented way. That's what we try to achieve. But then at the same time, we need to consider and take care of the cross-functional aspects of it as well. We need to secure architectural considerations. We need to secure total cost of ownership. We need to secure governance aspects of this, but try to work as close to business, as close to the real questions, the real problems, the real business value as possible. So that's what we are aiming for. But to be able to do that in an efficient way, you need to have some foundation, some foundation in place, both when it comes to data and ways of working and platforms and technology.
So do you have a system in place to help you and the team when you want to execute a project or execute an idea? Do you have a system in place to help you with that?
How to approach it, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
From a more way of working process perspective. Yeah, we have our ways of working, but we're currently, during the pandemic now, we have changed the way of working quite drastically. We used to work in a more old school project management office, project setup prior to the pandemic, but we have changed that and transformed ourselves more into a team-driven approach. We try to build more autonomous teams, being more end-to-end responsible for requirements, prioritization, and development. So that's what we have today. We have more like one huge team working with the backlog. We prioritize what to do next, and we have some governance, of course, when it comes to how we should do things, and we have an architecture in place for sure, and we work together with other architects or tech leads, that we call them, between different IT organizations to build best practice solutions. But now when we scale up, and that's what we are currently doing. We want to, as I said, divide this team into maybe more separate data teams, working maybe a bit more against different business areas, so we can have more focus on certain parts of the business, and so that the team and the engineers as well can understand a certain business area a bit more in detail, because it takes time to understand a complex business such as the airline industry and what we do. So that's next step on our journey, to divide the team into several data teams, and then being able to scale this in a slightly more efficient way. So that's what we are aiming for right now.
Well, Jonas, you've given me some really great insights there. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I've given you a good grilling. I think you've held up really well. One last question I do have for you. What advice would you give for aspiring leaders in data and analytics?
Yeah, I can just look back and from what I've done and my career, and I can honestly tell you that I never had any career plan, and I still don't have any career plan. But most of my decisions has been opportunity driven. So I think what you need to do here, if you are someone who wants to work within this field and wants to become a leader or get other positions within this industry, you never have you can't be afraid for changes. So try new roles. Don't be afraid to try out new technology, and don't be afraid to test new things if you believe it will be good for you long term. I've done that several times myself. Going from one technology stack to another technology stack, or going from consultancy business to a line manager role, or change industries. You need to try out different things to learn and to grow and to build competence over time. So don't be afraid to try new things and try to get out of your comfort zone.
Great advice, Jonas. Thanks for coming on the show again, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.